Blessings, welcome forward to Reasonings right here at the Tree of Life. I'm your host Jerome Sage Butler. This is my wonderful installment of the second in the series of Origin and Destiny. And these are my current offerings as we examine archetype and source and the essence of where we are now in the current timeline and time-space continuum. This information is necessary as the cosmic shifts become apparent upon us and upon our civilization. And you know, it first affects our state of being. You understand, before it starts to affect all these other things. We're feeling it psychically and do not even know what we're feeling. So the awesomeness of it is to continue the decoding of this information, its palatability, yeah, for where we are and where we will go for the future. So let's do a quick recap of where I left you last video. So we're talking about on the last video basically the anthropological narrative of the origin of man and civilization, and we looked at the narrative as it's given to us and how our ancestors have told us about it. And so we talked about the Adian period and the kind of energy around the Adian period, and then we came over onto the Archean period, and then we went on to the Prezoic and then the Phomozoic, and then we did a little jump, without defining anything too much, the Jurassic, Cretaceous, and then the Paleolithic Age, and then the Neolithic Age is and we kind of just someone left it there and worked just the knowledge of that age into where we are. So now we're going to do a lot of interwoven entanglements now, right, to bring everything into palatability. So now that I've laid out my preamble, let's continue with origin and destiny. Okay, so what I first did in the series leading up to this is show through origins a seemingly more natural understanding of our movement through genetic evolution into the biological, the socio, the political, and now where we are in this technological evolution that has a city-state at the top but has a certain mentality to it. And we looked at how it is that the major driving forces of that mentality, the kind of cultures that led to that mentality becoming the most popularized states of being and dichotomies and states of being and the understandings thereof, is led by this cohort of power brokers within the society. And so we looked at all the structures leading up to that and to the ramifications, to the misappropriations of power and effort. Okay, so now we're going to interwove it all together, going back through these times and bring the argument into a continuous flow. Blessings to the divine who has guided us through the the ancestry of the genome of the hominids. I am most thankful to be a vessel for the information. Mitochondrial Eve and mitochondrial Adam are references to our ancestors 200 to maybe 175,000 years ago, and are said to be the parents, mother and father, the paternal and the maternal, the patrilineal and the matrilineal ancestors of this entire plane currently, because these ancestors are out of Alkebulan. These hominids are from the warm south, yeah, and evolved over the hominids in the cold north during these extended interwoven patches of the ice age leading up to the Paleolithic age into the Neolithic. So the fact is, mitochondrial Eve and nuclear Adam is the farthest so-called ancestral link. We will go further to show that while the narrative established them in that period of time, the truth is, they have existed those common ancestors existed long before that, and they're just being placed in a timeline. So if you look at it like an allegorical archetype, so you can see that it's been placed in a timeline, and our timeline is going to take that ancestor, common ancestor, back more hundreds of thousands of years, right? To 2.3 million years back, right? Where the common genes that are now being differentiated as sapiens started to dominate the gene pool at the time. Because one of the things that we don't seem to understand is that we put the Neanderthal societies, as the European societies, and the African sapiens societies into connection around about this, about 45,000 years ago in a cultural sense, and 20,000 years ago in a genetic sense. But the actuality is we were here together. You know, if you check the Aboriginals of Australia, they spoke very clearly of saying that all the different types of beings that are defined by the Europeans existed while they exist. So, Pro-Magna, Denisovans, Neanderthal, Pro-Magna, sapiens, all existed during the same time. Now, let's look at the ancestry way before mitochondrial Eve and nuclear Adam. And that's where our argument is going. I just have to contextualize it so you can see an avenue of dichotomy on this argument that is presented, so you can form your own hypothesis. So let's look at the first argument. We said creation of the hominids were not within the time they made it apparent we came into being. So that age is called the Paleolithic Age, right? And anywhere from 2 million to 200,000 years to 100 to like, it varies because it's just timelines, right? So it goes up to somewhere about 15,000 years ago, right? And then onward start the Neolithic Age, right? And if you don't know what's the difference between these, one is that man is supposed to be primitive, working with stone tools, and then one is supposed to be man agricultural, and hence the seed of this agricultural society that we currently have, right? We're moving from the old ideology of hunter-gatherer to agriculturalist, and the old hunter-gatherer mindset is somewhat steeped into this somewhat overly verbal statement of nomadic life, and the hunter-gatherer philosophy dominates the European version of nomadic life. And so the Paleolithic man, or the Paleolithic man, because you know the language, so now we pronounce things, the Paleolithic man was said to be primitive. So we move Paleolithic man all the way back to the ages of the Archean age, right? As being the point where single cellular organisms become diffused and fused and become the multi-complex of the subaquatic, aquatic, amphibious, and humanoid manifestations. So one of the things when you go into genetic research, you're going to come down to a basic understanding of the structure of DNA. The Adian period is said to be the time when single cellular organisms manifested. So the ancestral wavelength and frequency tell us that the bacterium, right, this bacterium, which is the microbial aura, which is the intelligent photogens manifesting on a condensed waveform frequency, creating the original single cellular life form during the Adian period of time, experienced as glacial elemental mixes of vibrations and the early alchemical script of the hydrogen based, helium based, magnesium, sulfur based atmos, and zinc, cobalt, and manganese. Highly magnetic properties having the magnetite, which is the electric photogen that photosynthesizes light particles and beams for cellular reproduction, genetic reproduction, the early assemblage of biomass, later called the, in our term, the organic fauna-based, flora-based biomass and fauna-based biomass. So these photogens manifested in these single cell diffusions and transcription of information and the continuous assimilation and composite compilation of data of photosensitive electromagnetic data, creating the script of your genome, your genetic family tree. Our single cellular ancestors, the electromagnetic photogen based alkaline, acidic and alkaline life form, manifesting, harmonizing, creating the code of the DNA helix. Bacterial and viral sex, horizontal fusion, horizontal gene transfer at the single cell based organisms, the God particles, the microbial electromass usually associated with the solar plexus. This energy generation, where the idea of gut feeling comes from in the congealed mass, is the great inspiration to the brain, instructor to the brain, where the vibrational membrane to the cosmic life source is attached. The continuous horizontal gene transfer and gene fusion in the telomeres in the single cellular organisms began to create a divergent manifestation of being. And as being became divergent and self-replicating, the self-existent self-egg, the self-intent, self-replicating intent, the single cellular organism fused through the telomeres and became multicellular organisms and began the photogenetic, photosynthetic synthesis evolution of bacterial and microbial energy through viral and bacterial sex, CI and crophages, bacterial intelligence of the vortex, the entangled mirror, feeling and image of feeling going through the portal into the sheath of the self. These diffusions congealed not just the biomass, but the photoelectric hydrogen based principle of cellular respiration, protein based mitochondrial self generation and regeneration, and the nuclear environmental fusion of energy with the fission of energy from mitochondrial and the fusion from nuclear, the masculine and feminine magnetites manifested. Nikibu and Kadmon, the oldest references to the masculine and the feminine, Tatari. Blessings. And as such, you begin to see the God principle, the divine presence, first in manifestation in single cellular organism, then through the divine intelligence fusing through the DNA, horizontal gene transfer in the fusing in the telomeres, the consciousness expanded its multifaceted dichotomy of, what's that word I'm looking for? Dichotomy of being. And this dichotomy of being in its multiplicity created the Nano Bacterium, the 9 based archetypes, the balances between the C-phages and the crophages, which is the life generating within the cosmos of the lysogen and the lysogens, the potos, which is the self-replicating, regenerative, degenerating mass. Self-replication unto self-annihilation. These are the cancerous genes, kakrane, and the cancerous cell is based upon the potos. It is based upon the Setian principle of the psi-phages, which of the negative charged neurons, the negative charged particles that spin and charge opposite. So it is a vacuum and a suction creating the opposite polar in the entanglement. The crophages, the Asarian phages, the crophages having the light-based principle, the principle of the photogenetic transpiration and cellular horizontal gene transfer, the fusing through the telomeres, intelligent accruing of the psychic plasma from the plasmid, from the chromatic, from the chromosome, the chromatic, the cytoplasmic, the electromagnetic negatively charged principle to the electromagnetic positively charged principles, particles, microbial energy fields circulating the early energy patterns, creating the great ancestors, right, of mitochondrial Eve and nuclear Adam. We can talk about Homo habilis or Homo aborigines, and they are far within these realms of the first to be from the all. They are the all in formulation for the single cellular fusion that creates the fission, that creates the solar congealing of the biomass, and how this entire system, the automaton, is placed into being. So when we go down to the depths of it, we are vibrational microbial life, that the source lives in the microbial energy. The electromagnetic field is the same in the alchemical script as that microbial field. That microbial field with the sentient intelligence of the deepest urges, which goes beyond your consciousness. You are constantly, we are constantly searching through years, millennia of compiled information to have enough diffuse denotation of its actuality that it currently begulls our mind to consider how little we know of our viral and bacterial phages, which are the fundamental constructed manifestations of I am present, of I am present. It is interesting that the ages have made the information specific unto the powerful, because the powerful haven't discovered this in ancient times as sought, as I told you, to the mystery school system to control the flow of the information. But as we come back down the rabbit hole, like the Alice in Wonderland, going over the rainbow bridge into the entanglement of the divine all, one can see the sublime nature of the times being sublimated as the rotating astral bodies around my being currently. Kangarmitangoramitinera, hordari kintamare tongorengiji, huritero kungram. The deep microbial is the wavelength frequency of that light beam particle of the hydrogen, magnesium, manganese, and cobalt mixing with the helium. It is the interwoven crystalline nature of the DNA helix. It is the entangled nature of the energy systems. It is the very nature that we process sun wave and frequency through the epidermis. And one of the thing about it is we look at the solar technology not recognizing that it is mimicking the epidermis. But you didn't know that, did you? That your solar technology is mimicking your skin. Do you notice how hot you can get on a very sunny day, your body temperature? And you notice how incredibly intense that heat can feel. Well, that heat converted through induction becomes electrical energy. So the entire plane has bandwidths far beyond the uses and the awareness we currently have. The rod cells in human eyes see only to a certain wavelength unless awoken to the higher helix. But the animals are seeing with the broader rod cells greater bandwidth. So within the ancient technologies, they tell you of the serpent that coils around the central disk or the central orb. The vibrational Fibonacci, the Schumann resonance, the sequential vortex of vibrational energy, when its wavelength becomes tangible, it congeals as a photogen-based existence, photon-based existence, right? So we are a vibrating mass of bio-light, the biocortare. Our bioluminescence is more than just the light-based bioluminescence, right? We burn and create a cold, like, you know, see you burn the coal, you dig up the coal and burn it like the peat, yeah? We burn and create a carbonation, and the carbonization of our skin and the electrical property is called melanation, and the melanation is a vibration bandwidth and frequency which vibrates and harmonizes with 6, 3, and 9 tandari. And so when the cultures became about 6, 6, and 6, they subverted the flow of sacred energy into a cistern that is only going on the 9 wavelength frequency and vortex. It is 6 and 9 in harmonized in harmonization, and all things in the 3 dimensions of the subtext of consciousness becomes the quantumized particle of our astral projecting image of being, waveline, frequency, and sound resonation. Here I am, the metaphysical orb, the metaphysical alignment, Tare. This is I am. Here I am. Here we are. Here we are. Here we are. And so the flora, the fauna, the chlorophyll based experience, the cytoplasmic, the plasmid chromatic that leads to the awakening of the magnetic spectrum. So time is the timing of the pneumatics, and so that 60 seconds, that 60 seconds, that 60 minutes, those 12 hours that is light, those 12 hours that is dark, those 24-hour cycles, yeah, this cytoplasmic time-space continuum is a eternal, interwoven, interlapping flow of energy that is consistent, irregardless of the manifestations. Those who will look at themselves as dead, inert forms will die like the princes and the sons of men, for it is what they are. They are like useless, unelectrified, unelectromagnetized, unelectromagnetized dust. But those who worship in spirit and in truth, those who are present in being, are in the eternal spectrum that goes beyond that which is the slowest, densest wave frequency. We are enlightened, light, flowing, weightless upon the solar vortex, and so we ascend. Our divine ascension from our microbial bacterium to astral project into the new quantus of our presence is to awake to the knowing that our breath is the entire electrocordial magnetic spectrum from your cerebral cortex. The cerebrum is the bacterium of photogens, hydrogen, air, water, earth, fire. We are, I am, we are, as thou is, so art, I am, so art we. So when we now define ourselves similar to the philosophies that bring us to belief systems of dust, you are from, dust you shall return to. Because the electromagnetic singucellular horizontal gene transfer through the telomeres, bacterial virus based, bacterium and viral based procreation, these regenerative singucellular multiplication, fission, leading to the intelligence of let us make man and woman in our image and likeness. So when the first bacterial ancestor contacted me, I was shocked because I thought I was sick. Because you don't always understand these things. I thought I was sick. Little did I know that it was the bacterium, Portani, who was contacting me to tell me something very important. And so what has happened is that the bacterium said, we know ourselves. So I said, my first thought was, if you say you know yourself, do you know, Tare, what I look like? And the answer is yes, I know what you look like. Because I said to myself, what is in the macrocosm is the micro. But is it that we have assumed, congealed to be macro and non-congealed invisible properties as micro? But the microcosm is this manifestare, and the macrocosm is the bacterium, the viral and bacterial vibrational space, which is undefined, which is unquantifiable, that even our quantus in unitizing its measure is infinitesimal to the greatest measure. How can you escape the circle to see its ambit? So when my ancestor, the microbial ancestor, contacted me and told me that it knows itself, and I asked, do you know what I look like? And it reminded me from that, what we call that micro, which is now I'm telling you is a macro, that this is known. Hey, this is how this came to be. The single cellular dichotomy, fission, fusion, that creates all the forms already know the form. And I'm gonna bring you Christians who I lost you a long time, but it's okay. I'm gonna bring you up because you're good spirited, so you're listening. I'm gonna bring you up to something. The bacterium said, we know exactly what you look like. You're constructed from us. Ah, what is projecting through the opposite side of the mirror? Who is the image? Who is reflection? Whose movements are dependent upon cosmic entanglement? Who is truly free? Who is truly free-willed? And so the bacterium brought me to the word in the Bible. Before you were formed in your mother's womb, yet I knew you. Some of you to take a while to get what I'm saying, but some is with me. It means that bacterium is sentient. Life comes from life. The misunderstanding of bacterial life, microbial life, is based upon how we are taught. And it's not that it's a disrespect either, it's just misunderstanding. No one taught us unless we are awoken, or unless we're really smart, unless we are jinns in this. The genius with the ingenuity, right? The engine, you understand me, of genuity, of geneity. You understand me? So we're not going to just normally know this is what these things are saying. But the microbial life knew us. As the Spirit says, I knew you before you were formed in your mother's womb. And this is deep understanding of presence. So when we feel that there is an accident of construction, of creation, how could there not be intelligent design? The bacterial phages within me, the psi protein and the crow protein, the lysogen, right, and the lysic, the entangled negative and positive, regenerative, constructive, regenerative, destructive, the opposite 6 and 9, polar, entangled, charge, and spin, knows all of the components nature that becomes Jerome, Jerome, becomes YOU, becomes US, becomes us. It already consciously knows the DNA patterns of the tree. So satience, as it's taught to us, and because we are somewhat not, as I said, the ingenious, we didn't know that microbial, as it's given to us, is the energy in the biospectrum of the divine presence of Yahuwah in our environment. Because we have been taught by a society that has a sterilized perception of the organic magnetized property. The demagnetized property is easily manipulable, and as such is more applicable to this current thought processes manipulation. So they negated, but they do it in the ancient sacred scripts of the Mr. Schools. You cannot use demagnetized elements to do anything that really matters in this cosmic plane. So the magnetic stones I told you about, stones that resonate electrical property, a deep electromagnetic property, has something to do with the kind of energy that pervades in the environment. So I'm going to bring it into some congealed form. So the kind of wave files, storage devices we had in the past are storing information exactly as how they're being stored now. And as this technology gets more advanced, they are able to decode what was previously stored, because it's all a matter of this nature of the ingenious, not necessarily being the average individual. So the divine spectrum, the sacred matriarch and patriarchs got the codes. They got the divine codes. And so these divine codes unlock the stargate, unlock the portal to the all. Took us from beings back into being. So we can return through the astral gates into paradise. And the now that is upon us is not a now wrought with externalization. It is a now that is atomic and celestial stirrings, because the atomic fire, Spirit is correcting me, the atomic fire is causing such a problem within our vibrational field that the celestial fires are slowly, like the eternal fires on the temple, within the temples, going out. It's going out because it's losing its magnetization. So the more atomic and the more apotos rolls and rules within the cell, cellular degeneration happens. Degenerative diseases and illnesses will start to happen as apotos begins to devour our internal sun, devour our photons, our photogens start to devour our electrical vibrational energy, demagnetizing us and bringing us up to this lifeless, demagnetized dust. The earth is alive. The cosmic fabric is a living entity. Life comes from life. So even though we look at the microbial as just being, oh, these little things whirling at the lower level, their vibrations, their energy, they far outnumber the human population, those so-called single cellular organisms, so non-complex, yeah? Without them, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and elimination does not happen. And if that does not happen, the bipedal, the cytoplasmic electromagnetic movement, the Fibonacci, the circadian, does not congregate, does not happen. And if that does not happen, we do not have life. And that's when we are dead. And we, this hunk of fauna, will lie there. And what will depart from us? Sichoro. That electromagnetic energy that will be reabsorbed into the microbial aura. That's what will happen. And you will decompose, break back down into all of those single cellular organisms. The presence of I am in its microbial, electromagnetic, alchemical entanglement, the base of this biomass, the very sequence genome of the biomass, yeah, in the bacterial, the viral phages. We are indeed the light of Yahuwah, as He is the energy source that lights this lamp. So this lamp of destiny is lit amongst the chambers and the halls of the inner heart and the inner ear. Sequence the inner ear, and you will hear the drum beating 1, 2, 12, pattern sequential of the heart. And anytime this pneumatic system doesn't keep that rhythm, that timing, that everlasting song, that everlasting song, the everlasting song, the everlasting song, the everlasting song, hey. Anytime the everlasting song is not being played, well, the record is broken and life is just grown to a halt. So the everlasting song, this play between the darker potos, between the CI set phages and the Crow Osirian phages, the bacterial, viral, microbial spectrum, the single cellular organisms that congeal under divine being and presence, come, let us make man in our image and likeness. They knew us from before, and the microbial is what build the biomass, is what the congealed nature of the spectrum is about. So while we trivialize them, not because we want to, because of lack of understanding, they affect us so bad. Their disharmonization, their dis-ease causes degeneration. And so the self-replication in us unto annihilation becomes the cancerous nature, becomes the very serious toxic nature of cellular poisoning, cellular degeneration. And so we see where we are currently on the lowest demagnetized energy frequency, eating food created from life source that is demagnetized, does not have the electrolytes in it, does not have the magnetites in it, it does not have the living spirit in it, it doesn't have the organic microbial bacterium, it doesn't have the microbial spectrum in it, it doesn't have the microbial aura, it doesn't have life in it. And that's the truth. If a worm don't eat your food, it's not your food. And I want you to understand this. Please don't be so philosophical. You need to understand it literally. And so, while we continue to understand that we are not socio-political and economic in definition, these are power structure that have been developed by the philosophies of the age that is away from the actual benefit of the entangled spectrum, the flora and the fauna, the progeny of life itself. These ideologies are against it because it teaches us to apoticize our body and become lysogenic, carcinogenic, and lead to the bacterium death. And we don't realize we are in a biosphere, and being in a biosphere, our biological creators are still here, hallelujah, with us. Their progeny is within us. Let us keep the organization and the organs alive in the organized life, because this is our life. One to another, love each other, peace and truth be your way. Yeah, love the environment, for it is the very sheet of your flesh. It is that which it is made of, not demagnetized lifeless dust, but the highly electromagnetic. God said, come, let us make man and woman in our image and likeness. So, don't you know, microbial life is sentient and alive and is conscious? It is a very constructing block of your being. If you cut yourself in such a harsh and harmful way, would you know to reorganize your cellular particles so that each blood vessel is perfectly realigned, so that the memory of what has been is not interrupted, so that when that portion that's been lacerated is mended and healed, the memory from both segments are reharmonized, so that it is not like unto a strange entity harmonizing with me, that that which was separated knows itself and knows how to harmonize. What if we had to be conscious of all the thousands of neurons that go to the brain when something has gone electromagnetically wrong within the brain chemistry? What if we had to know all these things? How would we be able to heal ourselves? How would we be able to stay as beings? How would we keep our beingness without that microbial bacterium, the phages, the almighty in the alchemical, in the manifestation, or biological creators, knowing its own progeny, knowing its own being. Our consciousness could not be the source of our being. We are so far from being aware of all the things that goes on here, and I mean here, that maintains here. So while the urges of the circadian, of the molecular, the biomolecular aura, microbial aura inspires your gut feeling, it also inspires your appetites, your sexual, your reproductive, your sleep cycle, your genetical reproduction. So the call of nature, that drive for sexual sobriety, is a genetic drive for the fusion and fission of the telomeres, the continued evolution, manifestation of the single presence of I am in all being. Love and blessings. We continue on the path of origin and destiny. This has been part 2. I am Jerome Sage Butler. Reasoning is right here at the Tree of Life. Continue to like, share, and subscribe this peaceable offering of ancestral epigenetical truth and information. Sacred knowings, love and blessings, awesome gifts you are. Continue to be these awesome, awesome gifts of being. Love you. Bless you.